The billionaire CEO pulled his baseball cap low and stepped into his own store. Nobody recognized Marcus Thompson, not the cashiers, not the security guard, not even the manager who was supposed to be running this place. He'd come here undercover for a reason. But nothing could have prepared him for what he heard next. Desperate sobbing echoing from the employee restroom. Through the crack under the door, a silver name badge lay abandoned on wet tile. Maria Santos, custodial staff. The crying inside wasn't just sadness. It was the sound of someone whose world was falling apart. Marcus's blood ran cold. 3 months ago, corporate had received glowing reports about this location. Perfect employee satisfaction scores, 0 complaints. But the woman crying behind that door told a different story entirely. As he stood frozen in the harsh fluorescent light, one terrifying question burned through his mind. If this was happening in his own company, under his own nose, what else had he missed? The truth he was about to uncover would be worse than anything he'd imagined, and it would force him to question everything he thought he knew about leadership, loyalty, and the real cost of looking the other way. What started as a routine visit was about to become the most important 48 hours of his career. Stay with me, because what happens next will change how you see workplace leadership forever. Marcus knocked gently on the restroom door. "Excuse me, are you okay in there?" The sobbing stopped abruptly. He heard shuffling, then the sound of someone trying to compose themselves. I'm fine. Just give me a minute." But her voice betrayed everything. This wasn't fine. This was a woman on the edge. When Maria Santos finally emerged, Marcus saw a petite Latina woman in her early 40s, her custodial uniform wrinkled and her eyes red from crying. She quickly bent to retrieve her name badge, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grasp it.
"I'm sorry,"
she whispered, not making eye contact.
"I shouldn't be. I need to get back to work."
Marcus studied her more closely. Maria's hands were cracked and raw from harsh cleaning chemicals. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, the kind that come from working multiple jobs and getting too little sleep. But it was something else that caught his attention. The way she flinched when footsteps approached from the main floor. "You don't look fine," Marcus said softly. "I'm Mike, by the way. Just started here today." Maria glanced up, seeming to assess whether this stranger could be trusted. After a moment, her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. "It's just, everything's falling apart," she admitted. "My daughter Sophia needs surgery. Her heart condition is getting worse and I can't afford—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this." "How long have you worked here?" Marcus asked. 3 years. Never missed a day, never been late. But lately, she gestured helplessly toward a bulletin board covered in work schedules. Marcus followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. The schedule was a mess of crossed-out shifts, reduced hours, and handwritten changes. Maria's name appeared sporadically, sometimes 20 hours one week, 35 the next, then dropped back to 15. No consistency, no way to budget or plan. "They keep cutting my hours," Maria explained, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Miller says it's corporate policy, but I don't understand. The store's always busy. We're always understaffed." Marcus's jaw clenched. He knew the corporate policy on scheduling, and this wasn't it. Full-time employees were guaranteed consistent hours. What he was seeing looked like deliberate manipulation. "And when I asked about the health insurance that was supposed to kick in after 90 days, Maria's voice cracked. "He said I wasn't eligible because my hours were too irregular." The pieces were starting to form a picture that made Marcus's blood boil, but he forced himself to stay calm, to keep playing his role. "That doesn't sound right," he said carefully. Maria looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "There are others too. Tommy in electronics, Sarah in cosmetics. We're all having the same problems. But Mr. Miller says if we don't like it, plenty of people would be happy to take our jobs." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Brad Miller. He remembered the name from the management roster. Regional manager, good performance reviews, no red flags in his file. At least none that had made it to corporate.
Listen, Mike,
Maria continued, her voice dropping to a whisper.
I need this job. My daughter, she's only 8, and without the surgery.
She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus watched as she pinned her name badge back onto her uniform with trembling fingers. That small silver rectangle represented everything to her. Her daughter's medical care, their rent, their survival. And someone was using that desperation against her. I should go, Maria said, glancing toward the main floor. My shift ends at 11, but I'm supposed to come back at 6 tomorrow morning for inventory. Mr. Miller scheduled me for a double shift, but somehow the system only shows 8 hours of pay. As she walked away, Marcus noticed her slight limp, probably from standing on concrete floors for years without proper support. The company handbook clearly stated that employees were entitled to anti-fatigue mats and ergonomic support, another policy that apparently wasn't being followed. Marcus stood alone in the hallway, staring at that chaotic schedule board. Each crossed-out shift represented a family struggling to make ends meet. Each arbitrary hour cut meant someone choosing between groceries and gas money. He'd built Thompson Enterprises on the principle that good companies take care of their people. But somewhere in the gap between boardroom policies and floor-level reality, that principle was being systematically destroyed. The question was, how deep did this go, and who else was suffering while he sat in his ivory tower, oblivious to their pain? Marcus didn't have to wait long to see the system in action. The next morning, he watched from the break room as Maria clocked in for her 6 a.m. shift. She moved carefully, favoring her left leg, but her face was determined. Whatever struggles she faced at home, she was here, ready to work. At 6:47 a.m., Brad Miller emerged from his office. Brad was exactly what Marcus had expected. Mid-30s, overly gelled hair, and the kind of swagger that came from having just enough power to abuse it. He wore his manager badge like a weapon, and his eyes immediately found Maria mopping near the electronics section. "Santos!" Brad's voice cut across the store like a whip crack. Maria's shoulders tensed, but she continued working. "Santos, I'm talking to you!" She finally looked up, her face carefully neutral. "Yes, Mr. Miller? This floor is still dirty. What exactly have you been doing for the past hour?" Marcus watched Maria's jaw tighten. The floor was spotless. He could see his reflection in the tiles, but she simply nodded. "I'll go over it again." "You better. And next time, maybe try actually working instead of feeling sorry for yourself." Brad's voice dripped with contempt. "Speaking of which, I need to see you in my office. Now." Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. He forced himself to stay seated, to keep observing. If he intervened now, he'd blow his cover before understanding the full scope of the problem. In Brad's office, Maria stood while Brad remained seated, a deliberate power play that made Marcus's skin crawl. Through the glass partition, he could see Maria's posture grow smaller with each word Brad spoke. Tommy Chen, the electronics clerk Maria had mentioned, slipped into the break room and sat down heavily beside Marcus. "Poor Maria," Tommy muttered, shaking his head. "Third time this week she's been called in there." "What's he saying to her?" Marcus asked. Tommy glanced around nervously. "Same thing he says to all of us, that we're lucky to have jobs, that people like us—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "That we should be grateful for whatever hours we get." "People like us?" "You know, immigrants, single mothers, people who can't afford to quit." Tommy's voice was bitter. "Brad knows exactly who he can push around." Through the glass, Marcus watched Brad lean back in his chair, his body language radiating casual cruelty. Maria stood rigid, her hands clasped behind her back like a soldier enduring inspection. Then Brad did something that made Marcus's vision go red. He pulled out Maria's timesheet and began making changes with a red pen right in front of her. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but he could see Maria's face crumple as Brad slashed through her recorded hours. "He's cutting her time again," Tommy whispered, probably claiming she took unauthorized breaks or something. "Last week, he docked Sarah 3 hours for excessive bathroom usage. She's pregnant." Marcus reached for his phone, his fingers finding the voice recorder app. Whatever was happening in that office, he needed evidence. Through the thin walls, Brad's voice carried clearly. "Told you before, Santos, if you can't handle the workload without getting emotional, maybe this isn't the right job for you. There are plenty of people who'd be grateful for your position."
Please, Mr. Miller.
Maria's voice was barely audible.
I just need consistent hours.
"My daughter, your personal problems aren't my concern. What concerns me is that you've been talking to other employees about scheduling. That sounds like troublemaking to me." Marcus's thumb hit record. "I wasn't making trouble, I was just what? Trying to organize some kind of complaint? Because that would be very unfortunate for your employment status here." The threat was crystal clear. Maria fell silent. "Now I'm cutting you back to 12 hours next week. Maybe that'll help you focus on work instead of stirring up drama. And Santos? If I hear you've been talking to anyone else about scheduling or policies, we'll need to discuss whether you're a good fit for this company at all." Marcus watched Maria nod silently, her dignity stripped away piece by piece. When she finally emerged from the office, her face was pale but composed. She walked past the break room without looking in, her head held high despite everything. But Marcus had seen enough. The phone in his pocket contained Brad's own words, a smoking gun that revealed the systematic abuse of power happening under Thompson Enterprises' name. As Brad returned to his office, whistling casually like he hadn't just destroyed someone's week, Marcus felt something crystallize inside him. This wasn't just about Maria anymore. This was about every vulnerable employee who'd been ground down by petty tyrants like Brad Miller. The time for observation was over. Now it was time to see just how deep this corruption went. Marcus left the store that evening with his mind racing. He drove his rental car, a modest sedan, nothing that would draw attention, back to the budget hotel where he'd been staying under his fake identity. In room 237, surrounded by corporate reports and employee files, he began planning his next move. The recording on his phone played back Brad's threats, each word like a nail in the man's professional coffin. But Marcus knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. If Brad felt comfortable enough to openly threaten employees, what was he doing when he thought nobody was watching? Marcus pulled up the store's employment records on his laptop. What he found made his stomach turn. Over the past 8 months, the store had seen a 60% turnover rate among hourly employees. The official reason listed for most departures was voluntary resignation, but Marcus could read between the lines. People didn't voluntarily leave jobs in an economy like this. They were driven out. He cross-referenced the departure dates with Brad's performance reviews. Ironically, Brad's numbers looked stellar. Labor costs down 23%, efficiency ratings up, 0 formal complaints filed with HR. On paper, Brad Miller was a model manager. But Marcus was beginning to understand how Brad had gamed the system. Keep employees desperate and scared, prevent them from working enough hours to qualify for benefits, and make sure anyone who might complain simply disappeared from the roster. It was elegant in its cruelty. Marcus opened a new browser window and began crafting his deeper cover story. Mike Henderson, laid-off construction worker, desperate for any job, no family to worry about, just grateful for the opportunity. The kind of employee Brad would see as perfectly exploitable. He practiced the persona in the mirror, adjusting his posture, his speech patterns, even his walk. Marcus had grown up in neighborhoods like this before his business took off. He knew how to blend in. The key was remembering rather than acting. The next morning, Marcus returned to the store in his worn jeans and second-hand work boots. He approached Brad's office with the perfect mixture of desperation and eagerness. "Excuse me, Mr. Miller? I heard you might have some openings. I'm willing to work any shift, any hours you need." Brad looked up from his computer, his eyes immediately assessing this new potential victim. Marcus could practically see the calculations running through the man's head. Another desperate worker to manipulate. "Experience? Construction mostly, but that dried up. I need steady work. I'm not picky about the job. Cleaning, stocking, whatever you got." "References?" Marcus handed over a carefully crafted resume, complete with fake references he'd arranged through contacts. "These guys will vouch for me. I show up, I work hard, I don't cause problems." Brad's smile was predatory. "I like that attitude. Tell you what, Mike, I can start you in custodial. Night shift, $12 an hour. You'll be working with Maria, but don't let her fill your head with complaints. She's got a tendency toward drama." The casual cruelty in Brad's voice made Marcus want to reach across the desk, but he forced himself to nod eagerly. "That sounds perfect, sir. When do I start?" "Tonight, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And Mike?" Brad leaned forward. "I reward loyalty and hard work. Employees who understand how things work here do well. Employees who cause trouble don't." Marcus nodded like he understood perfectly. And he did, just not in the way Brad intended. That evening, Marcus changed into his work clothes in the store bathroom, transforming himself completely into Mike Henderson. He pinned his temporary name tag to his shirt, the plastic rectangle feeling foreign after years of expensive suits and boardroom meetings. When Maria arrived for the night shift, she looked surprised to see him. "You came back," she said quietly. "Told you I needed the job," Marcus replied. "Guess we're working together." Maria studied his face, perhaps sensing something different about this new employee but unable to place what it was. "Stick close to me tonight," she said finally. "I'll show you the ropes. And Mike, everything I told you yesterday about being careful around Mr. Miller, double that for the night shift. That's when he does his worst work." As the store lights dimmed and the last customers filtered out, Marcus felt the weight of what he was about to discover. Somewhere in the next 8 hours, he would learn the full extent of Brad Miller's operation. He was no longer just observing the problem, he was about to live it. The store transformed after closing time. What had seemed like a normal retail environment during the day revealed its true nature in the fluorescent-lit shadows of the night shift. Marcus followed Maria through her routine, learning the intricate choreography of overnight custodial work. But within the first hour, he began noticing things that made his blood pressure rise. "Maria, why are you cleaning the employee break room with the same supplies you use for the bathrooms?" he asked, watching her rinse a mop in a bucket that reeked of industrial disinfectant. She glanced around nervously before answering. "Mr. Miller cut the cleaning supply budget, says we're using too much." She held up a nearly empty bottle of floor cleaner. "This has to last the whole week for the entire store." Marcus knew the corporate allocation for cleaning supplies. This store should have 10 times what he was seeing. At 11:30 p.m., Brad made his first appearance. He prowled through the aisles like a predator, his footsteps echoing in the empty store. When he found Maria restocking paper towels in the customer restrooms, his voice cut through the silence. "Santos, you're moving too slow. At this rate, you'll be here until morning." "I'm working as fast as I can, Mr. Miller." "Not fast enough. I'm